Really happy to be here, having this opportunity to share with you. I want to make it really clear to you where this work came from. I expect many of you have been to workshops and presentations before, and that there was somebody there, or several people, that came from a major university where people, doctors, people who had educational backgrounds, who've been in school for years, have decided what those of us who experience psychiatric symptoms need to do, and then they come to a workshop or training, and then they tell us all what we need and must do. And I want to be very clear with you that this is not where this work comes from, that it comes from a really, really different place, that it comes from people like yourselves. It's a gathering of information. And I want to tell you what made me want to gather this information and how I began that process. I first heard the words mental illness and became aware of mental health problems when I was just a child. I was 8 years old. I was the middle child of 5, and my mother was a very wonderful woman, very outgoing, very gregarious, very warm and loving. She began spending every day sitting in a rocking chair, rocking and crying. And before long, they took her off to the state psychiatric hospital. And at the state psychiatric hospital, she had 150 electric shock treatments. The food there was awful. She was in a room where she slept with a very small room. There were 40 beds and just a little night table in between. And all 40 people were supposed to sleep in the same room. And I know I have problems sleeping in a room with one other person. You know, somebody else might be snoring, and people were having a difficult time. They're away from their family and supports. They were probably crying and yelling. I can't imagine how she slept. There was nothing to do all day. People walked and paced. Every Saturday morning, the 5 of us went to visit her, and we walked through these big, thick doors that clanged behind us and that were locked, and we went in to see my mother. And sometimes she was walking in circles, saying words that we couldn't understand. She hardly seemed to even be aware that we were there. And other times she was running all over the place, introducing us to everybody, acting in a fashion that was extremely unusual and bizarre. It was really, really scary. And during that time, the doctor told my father and told us that we should stop coming to see my mother, that she was incurably insane. But we never stopped going to see her. And after 8 years, people started noticing that she wasn't having these symptoms anymore. In fact, she was helping to take care of the other patients. And then she did something that I think is what got her discharged. She started getting the patients together in small groups and getting them to talk to each other. And the hospital people were very uncomfortable with that. And so they discharged her. And I think that was way back in the early 1950s. And I think that that may have been one of the first support groups. So that stayed with me, and I think that it was when my mother was in the hospital that I experienced my first depression. It seemed reasonable for a child to get really depressed when mom is gone. And we just visit her on Saturday mornings, and we're trying to take care of ourselves and bring ourselves up while our dad worked long hours on the railroad. And so I remember that I didn't talk to people unless they asked me something. I'd respond if somebody asked me a question, but basically I didn't talk to anybody. And I think that was comfortable for everybody because it was really difficult having these 5 children and nobody to really raise them. So one was very quiet. That was great. And as I proceeded through my life, went on to school, got married, had children, I had periods of time when I was just had lots and lots and lots of energy, commit to all kinds of projects and do all kinds of things. And then there were other times when I was very, very deeply depressed and didn't do much of anything. And I got away with that until I got to a place where I was very overcommitted. I was running a small private school that I had started for children with troubles. I had 5 teenage children of my own, and I was also doing foster care for other teenagers. And I woke up one morning and I realized I just couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't keep going. So for the first time, I went to see a psychiatrist. And that psychiatrist, just one visit, and he said to me, well, you're manic-depressive, just like your mother. Take this pill and you'll be fine. He didn't ask me about my hectic, chaotic lifestyle. He didn't ask me about my very, very troubled marriage. Didn't ask me how I took care of myself. Didn't ask me what I ate. Just said, take this pill and you'll be fine. So I said to myself, great. And I took the pill. And I got away with it. I didn't learn anything about how to take care of myself. I didn't even learn what that pill was. I didn't even look it up in a book. I just, 3 times a day, I put that pill in my mouth. And I got by. I didn't make any big improvements in my life, except I left the troubled marriage and got into another troubled marriage. But I got by with that pill. And it wasn't until about 10 years after I started taking it that I got a stomach bug, kind of thing that anybody could get. And I got very dehydrated. But the one thing that I knew I had to do was keep taking that pill. And I kept taking the pill. And I got severe toxicity from taking it. And I almost died. And after I got better, the doctors were very concerned. They said, oh my, she's manic-depressive. We can't have her off her lithium. And right away they wanted me to start taking lithium again. And I did. And the toxic reaction came up again at even a very, very low dose of lithium. And commonly happens when somebody has been taking a medication for a long period of time, has not learned any wellness tools, has not learned anything about how to take care of themselves. When I could no longer take that medication, my symptoms went wildly out of control in a way that I had never experienced before in my life.
My psychiatrist said lithium 3 times a day would take care of the whole problem. What an easy answer. I was thrilled. For 10 years, I took my lithium and continued to do everything I could to improve myself. My life continued to be very chaotic, but my ups weren't so up and my downs weren't so down. Then I was overtaken with a dangerous episode of lithium toxicity. Why hadn't anyone ever told me that if you keep taking your lithium when you are dehydrated from a stomach bug, you can get lithium toxicity? Come to think of it, I knew so very little about this substance I was religiously putting in my mouth. By the way, lithium, if you're not aware, is a drug that has a very narrow range of helpfulness. If you go too low, then it's not helpful. It doesn't really do anything for your mental health. If you go just too high, it's actually toxic. Lithium, I haven't fully done all of the research yet, but lithium affects sodium in the body and sodium channels in the body. Sodium is a really important, even though we're told to avoid salt in our diets, we actually do need sodium because it's involved in almost like every bodily mechanism. And it's frequent that on lithium, you might get dehydrated or get like dry mouth. And so like something like dehydration from a stomach bug could be lethal. And you also have to have very consistent blood tests while taking lithium. I've been on lithium for less than a month and I've had my blood tested I believe 4 times, which is really not fun because I have those veins that are really hard to find, and you know, like phlebotomists have to go ask their supervisor to come in and like help find my veins. And I also I bruise very easily. This is from over a week ago. And by the way, it's like they always, you can barely see it now, but they always have to try both arms as well. So, although I was doing everything in my power to keep myself well, I still felt that the ultimate responsibility for my well-being was in the hands of my psychiatrist. I was totally trusting that he was making the right decisions on my behalf. After the experience with lithium toxicity, my body didn't seem to want it anymore. Every time I tried to take it, the symptoms of toxicity returned. And without it, those deep, dark depressions and periods of high achievement returned. Only now, they were overwhelming. The depressions were dark and suicidal. The high moods were totally out of control. Psychosis became a way of life. I lost my job. Friends and family members backed off. I spent months in the psychiatric ward. My life felt like it was slipping away. They tried one drug after another, usually several at a time. Nothing seemed to bring me back to life. Through the haze, I was searching for answers. I wondered how other people with these kinds of episodes get by. They couldn't all be like me, unable to work and almost unable to take care of myself. I asked my doctor how people like me get by on a day-by-day basis. He told me he'd get that information. I looked forward to my next visit with great anticipation, fully expecting to find some answers. What a disappointment. He said there was information on medication, hospitalization, and restraint, but nothing on how people live their lives. And I will let Mary tell the rest of the story.
Out of the hospital, and they were trying to stabilize me on other medications. I could no longer work. My life just was in a downward spiral. And before long, I was living on $500 a month of Social Security disability payments, and I was in a housing complex for the elderly where there were spaces for a few people who were considered to be permanently disabled. And I was very, very discouraged, very, very discouraged. I felt like my life was over. And it was at that time that I said to my psychiatrist, how do people with these kinds of symptoms get by on a day-to-day basis? And he said, I'll get you that information for next time. So I really looked forward to that next visit. And he was hoping that in my confusion, I think, in my having these difficult symptoms, I'd forget about it. But I hadn't forgotten about it. And I said, where's this information? And he said, I couldn't find any information on that. I said, we don't have anything like this. This was in the mid to late 80s. And he said, we don't have that kind of information. We have information on medication. We have information on restraint. We have information on hospital programs. But basically people with this kind of situation, they don't get better. This is not the kind of thing that you should be thinking about. It made me really angry, and I think that was a good thing. And so I went to my vocational rehabilitation counselor, and I said, I really want to find out how people who experience these kinds of symptoms get by on a day-to-day basis, and maybe even how they get well. And fortunately, I had a very, very supportive vocational rehabilitation counselor. And she said, well, let's develop a Social Security plan to achieve self-sufficiency and see if we can get the money so that you can do this research, so that we can get you a computer and you can do some mailings and we can work together to develop some surveys. And so we developed that plan and got funding, and I began to look closely at 150 volunteers from around the country at how they managed. I sent out 3 different surveys, and as the information came in, it was really piling up. I didn't really do the research in the way that some people suggested, that I just ask questions and then people check off 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or yes or no. I didn't do that. I wrote open-ended questions, and people wrote back to me. They wrote volumes. They wrote on the front and the back and the sides, and they sent me tapes, and they added pages. And here I am with all these symptoms and all this stuff piling up on the floor in my living room. And so a little bit each day, I just committed myself to a little bit each day. I started inputting it in the computer. And I really liked what I was finding and began incorporating some of this into my own life and was starting to get better and better. And the more I did and the better I felt, the more I felt like I should be doing something with this information. So I said to my psychiatrist, I think I should write this. This is so valuable to me and I'm feeling so much better. I think I should write a book. And he said, you're being grandiose. There's no way you could write a book. So I went home and I started writing the book. And then I went back and I said, the other thing I think I could really do with this is I could do workshops. And he said, there's no way somebody with your kind of symptoms could do workshops. So I started doing workshops. And I got the book finished and I started selling the book at the workshops. And I was doing better and better. building support systems for myself, learning how to eat right, getting good medical checkups so that I got a thyroid disorder fixed. I was making sure I got lots of light. All kinds of things were changing, and my family and friends were profoundly affected by the change they were seeing in me. So I took that little first book that I developed that was really doing very well and affecting lots of people's lives, and I sent it out to some publishers, and I told some people I did that, and they said, you don't do that kind of thing. You have to have an agent. You have to go through processes. But one of those companies called me back and said, we want to publish your book. And that, along with the publishing of that first book and going to a conference and presenting, were really opened the doors for me. And this work has just grown since then. And my wellness has gotten better and better and better. And now I have written 12 books. We have a curriculum based on this. We have people teaching it all over the country and all over the world in mental health centers, selling thousands and thousands of books all the time. People who are interested in how they can learn themselves, how they can help themselves to be well. And we're seeing more and more and more people who are taking responsibility for their own wellness and getting on with their lives. So I hope this has been helpful to you and will support you in remembering what I've said as you work on mental health recovery and on developing a wellness recovery action plan.